Orleans, you got to pick the time of year quite carefully. It's a convention city, and when a convention's on, the hotels book up like that. So the thing to do is to check the internet, find out when there isn't a convention on, and then you can stay in a hotel like this for half the price. Has been in this spot for 130 years. It's open 24 hours a day, and it's famous for its steaming chicory-laced coffee and these square donuts called beignets. Oh, not a good place to wear black. Embarrassing. M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-P-P-I. M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-P-P-I. The French founded New Orleans in 1718, and they chose to settle here because the crescent in the Mississippi provided the perfect lookout on all sides. And they started building in what is now Jackson Square. Over the years, the French Quarter expanded 7 blocks that way by 14 blocks that way. And there are a lot of good stories in the city, so I thought I should get to know it with a really good storyteller. You must be Lucille. Yes. I'm Justine. My first question to local historian Lucille Loeb was, what exactly is a Creole?
The meaning of the word Creole is anything indigenous to the new colony. So you can have a French Creole, an Irish Creole, an Indian Creole, a African Creole, home born in the new colony.
French Creoles ran New Orleans, controlling the flourishing trade on the Mississippi, and the architecture in the French Quarter reflects their European influence.
This is a typical home that a Frenchman would have built for his family, and that is the typical architecture of the French.
They also built themselves a grand ballroom where special balls were held to enable wealthy French Creole men to choose a slave as his mistress.
The Frenchman would go to a Mardi Gras carnival ball, bring his wife, but then he would bring her home, and he would go to another ball, which was called the quadroon ball.
So he'd come in the room, and the room would be full of 15-year-old girls?
Oh, yes, and their mothers.
And their
mothers was here, too.
Because they were all slaves.
They were all slaves, yeah.
So then the Frenchmen had their mistress.
Yes.
And then they had their wives.
Oh, yes, they had 2 families.
Mistress and wife. So what did the wives feel about this?
The wives did not like that idea, but that was
they didn't.
There was nothing that they really could do. This is a typical Creole cottage house. This is the type of house that the Frenchman would have put his mistress up in.
So this was the mistress's house?
That was the mistress house.
And she was free?
No, she was not free. She was still a slave.
She was still a slave.
But through that system, he provided a house for the mother. The girl was put up in the front, and the mother was put up in the back. He would also provide a slave to take care of the house.
So he gave his mistress, who was a slave, a slave.
That's right.
And the mother got a slave, too?
And the mother used this mistress slave.
There are plenty of ways of seeing the sights in the French Quarter, but it's small enough to tour on foot. Lucille's tour ends just outside the French Quarter in Congo Square.
This is where the slaves would come and congregate on a Sunday, and they would dance the calendo and the Congo.
The Congo. Do you know how to do the calenda?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Let's see some calenda. Today, Congo Square is considered one of the most important cultural sites in the United States because it was in this spot that African music that was suppressed in other parts of the South flourished. And it was a fusion of this African culture which was allowed to thrive along with European culture that would create jazz. Jazz is everywhere, and the subtropical climate means that during the day, it's all over the streets.
Well, I got a man in New Orleans.
Elijah James.
He's the sweetest old man you ever did see.
Elijah James. And I had a woman from Tokyo. Little eyes Jane. Her mama told me don't see her no more. Little eyes Jane. Everybody say, oh, little eyes Jane.
So why was jazz born in New Orleans? I know that's a big question.
I don't know, technically. I mean, it could possibly be the hardships, man, because I'm telling you, this is a hard city. It's a hard city to work in. It's a hard city to live in. It's wonderful, though.
But then you'd be singing the blues.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do. We sing the blues, too, let me tell you. Jazz is all around. We grow up with it. You know, it's everywhere. It's just something that's instilled in us, I guess.
This is called brass band jazz.
Is that a New Orleans kind of music?
Definitely indigenous to New Orleans.
They're great.
They are great.
Okay, starting today, 5 days a week, 1 hour. Running. Walking. For 30 minutes. 20 minutes. Ugh, forget it. Okay.
Take a streetcar named Desire, then transfer to one called Cemetery, then ride 6 blocks and get off at Elysian Fields. Those were Vivian Lee's first words in the film set in New Orleans called A Streetcar Named Desire.
Thank you. How much is it? $1. Well, this streetcar is called St. Charles, and these days, if you want to get to Desire, you have to take a city bus.
St. Charles streetcar runs west from the French Quarter through the Warehouse District to the wonderfully picturesque Garden District.
In 1803, Napoleon, who was desperate for cash, sold the French colony of Louisiana to the United States for only $15 million. But the thing is, the Creoles hated the Americans and wouldn't let them live in the French Quarter. So the Americans built their own city right outside the quarter, here in what's known today as the Garden District.
The first house was built in the French Creole style, but that was way too down market for the new arrivals.
The Americans wanted class, so they used a lot of Greek Revival architecture in the building of their homes, with Ionic pillars on the ground floor and Corinthian pillars above, so that the eye would be drawn over all the costly details.
Tour groups comb the streets, admiring the incredible mansions and soaking up the ambiance of this historical American neighborhood.
That's the home of the novelist Anne Rice, the woman who wrote all those vampire books. And I guess that's her car. Even in death, the Americans and the Creoles kept their distance. The Americans built their cemetery here on the edge of the Garden District, but I'm more interested in visiting the Creole cemetery back toward the French Quarter. Cemeteries in New Orleans are unusual. You can't bury bodies under the ground here because the water table is so high. So when there's a flood, the bodies rise to the surface. So they built all the graves above the ground. The thing is, the Louisiana sun is so hot that these tombs become like ovens. And the bodies, they're cremated by the sun in less than a year. Now, tradition is that the body's allowed to lie for at least a year and a day. And when the next member of the family dies, they just push those remains in the back, and then they slide in the new coffin. And even though this is the oldest cemetery in New Orleans, it's still being used today. The cemetery used to have sculptures all over it, and the sad thing is, people keep stealing them. Last year, over 200 sculptures went missing from cemeteries in New Orleans. Cemeteries should be visited with a group since there have been a number of robberies here, and every tour of the St. Louis No. 1 will bring you to this spot, adorned with offerings and scratched with X's. It is said to be the grave of Marie Laveau, the 19th century voodoo queen of New Orleans. Back in the French Quarter, just off Bourbon Street, you can pursue Marie Laveau beyond the grave at the Voodoo Museum. Voodoo was an African religion brought over by the slaves, and it was practiced despite being banned in the New World. Many practitioners became Roman Catholic, and the two religions merged to create the voodoo that lives on in New Orleans. Everywhere you go, there's a party in New Orleans, even in the Voodoo Museum.
And also
some kind of
the
ceremony. There's a woman with a snake in the middle of the room.
And of the fish and of the meat first.
Yeah.
That's symbolizing the earth.
It turns out it's a voodoo wedding. This couple have come all the way from New Jersey to be married here. The service can cost anything from $250, and it's certainly a memorable way to tie the knot.
Love is God. Substance is God. Spirit is God. Wisdom and intelligence is God. You have to move.
In D.C., voodoo holds no fear, but for a long time, it was seen as dark and dangerous.
Why is it that voodoo has this
connotation
of putting the pins in the dolls?
Yeah, that's good, because what you're doing is really identifying that part of you which needs healing. See, because voodoo dolls offer healings. And when you are looking at somebody else and you get angry with that person, it's because you're seeing yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you're putting that pin into that doll, you are really identifying that area which needs healing within you. And that's all you can do, is heal you.
One horse and cart made its way down Bourbon Street. Another was arriving, this time for a funeral. Chicken Man was a local voodoo priest, and like all gatherings in New Orleans, his funeral became a musical event.
Tracy Gallagher for the Travel Channel. Campers at Yosemite have experienced numerous car break-ins. The culprits weren't thieves or pranksters, they were black bears hunting for food. Because campers weren't putting food away properly, the bears got innovative. They just broke the windows and looked for lunch in travelers' cars. For more on taking bear precautions while camping, log on to our website at travelchannel.com.
For 30 years, Geraldo Rivera's covered the world, but never like this.
Sailing around the world has been my goal since I was old enough to have a dream. Now we're 20 countries, 25,000 miles from home. We've had a wild, sometimes frightening, exhilarating past, being boarded by the Egyptian Navy, being chased by Somali pirates. We've gone 2/3 of the way around the world. And now we're poised to be on the international date line on New Year's Eve, 1999.
Sail to the Century, tomorrow night at 10, only on the Travel Channel.
There's nowhere else I'd rather be than sharing each other's company. Right here is where we belong together. There's nowhere else I'd rather be than sharing each other's company.
Beat National Historical Park is just 15 miles south of New Orleans, and it's easy to get there with a car or a bus, but for a bit more adventure and for a bird's eye view of the bayou, I'm taking one of those.
Is 20 miles south of New Orleans, in the heart of a huge expanse of swamp and lakes. This area takes the full force of the hurricanes that swing in from the Gulf of Mexico between May and November, and the fragile wetlands are eroding at an alarming rate.
A trip on a seaplane costs about $70. I wonder if those people feel as sick as I do.
Wonderful flight.
Well, here's your bag, and you have fun in Mardi Gras.
Okay, maybe I'll see you in the French Quarter.
I'm afraid not. I'm gonna hit the slopes.
You're going skiing?
I gotta go skiing.
You're avoiding it?
That's it.
Oh my
You're
goodness.
Fun now.
Okay, thank you. As pretty as a picture postcard. That lake is very high and very close to the hotel. Maybe that's why they built those houses on stilts, in case of flooding. Now I'm supposed to check in at the Blue House. And I'm staying at the Yellow House. There are some lovely antiques in this room, but unfortunately, this dresser got a little bit damaged in the flood that they had last year. You can see where the water came to, but that's the price you pay for building on the ground floor. And I love this bed. This is what you call a Louisiana plantation bed. And this is where the post goes for the mosquito netting. It was said that during the Civil War, the Southern ladies would hide their jewels in that hole. I don't really have anything of value to hide. This is Cajun country. I don't really know what a Cajun is. That's why I've come to the Bayou Barn, because every Sunday they hold a traditional Cajun fée d'odo, which I hope is a dance. I do know that the Cajuns, who speak in ancient French, they were the ones to come up with the expression, laissez les bon temps rouler, which means, let the good times roll.
Cajuns are originally from Canada, but were expelled in the 1750s by the British, who wanted their land. The Creoles didn't want them in New Orleans, so they settled out here in the Louisiana swamps.
Ça fait un ou deux fois qu'ils n'ont pas eu bon, non, même ils trouvent bon. On l'a emmené à peu près 2 ou 3 mois, ça écoutait un bain de on l'a
I
emmené
don't know
back.
what you're saying, but it sounds so good.
On l'a emmené back pour vous écouter, hein, pour vous voir à vous autres et écouter la musique.
So this
Mon
is...
garçon est un vrai Cajun, tu connais, il est 99% Cajun.
Your son is 99% Cajun?
That means he can talk almost completely 100%
French?
Yeah, and he's
so
only
do you
25.
call it French or do you call it Cajun?
Cajun.
Cajun.
Cajuns are fiercely proud of their culture and gather regularly to celebrate their music and, of course, their food, like the local delicacy of boiled crawfish.
I stuck the head, because that's where the fly was at.
Very spicy. The heads are very spicy.
The Cajun doesn't just live life. So most people live life. The Cajun celebrates life.
For most of this century, French was not allowed to be taught in local schools. Now there's a campaign to introduce Cajun French into the curriculum.
Fishing has always been big in Louisiana, and lately sports fishing has become the major attraction, and these guys have worked out a new variation on an old theme. Hi.
Hi, Justine. Are we ready?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not quite sure what I'm getting myself into here.
Fun.
Oh, yeah? Guaranteed fun?
Guaranteed.
500 horsepower of turbo-thrusted fun, to be precise. These airboats are exceptionally fast and exceptionally loud.
When I'm sitting on this boat with those cans on my head because it's so noisy, I'm thinking, my gosh, the noise you're making, the fish below must be freaking out. The birds around us must be freaking out. You're driving over marshes and freaking out whatever's in the marsh. It seems like a kind of high-impact way to have a little fun.
It's a little extreme. It's a little extreme, but it's different.
As the sun sets over the peaceful swamp, we got into place for a little bow fishing, a sport that combines the skills of archery and fishing with the floodlighting of a small football stadium. The arrow has a line attached, joined to a fishing reel on the bow.
I think this is a very messy, bloody, noisy way to kill a couple of fish.
Okay, you ready? Oh, it's not too heavy for you, is it?
No, it's fine.
Okay, great.
My head is still spinning from that airboat. It was so loud.
Yes, I know the
New
air.
Orleans.
New Orleanians rate Mardi Gras success depending upon how much trash has been collected, and this was a good year, up 10% on last year, with 900 tons of garbage collected.
A lot of people come to New Orleans for Mardi Gras, Jazz Fest, and the conventions. But the truth is, what makes New Orleans so great is right here 365 days of the year, the music and the people. I mean, unlike other cities, folks here, they take their time with you. They love to chat and tell stories. And despite the fact that New Orleans is one of the poorest cities in the country, she is generous and genuine. And besides the beads, I hope I'm taking some of her spirit home with me.
the plantation. She witnessed enough of her grandmother's cruelty to know that she wanted out of the plantation system and the confines of traditional Creole life.
For instance, Laura is playing on this well when she's 7 years old, and a man came up to her to get water for his mule. She knew him. He was 65 years old, Philippe. She, standing on the well, has never been so close to him before, and she notices above his eyes markings. She said, what's this above your eyes? He said, I was branded by your grandmother when I ran away in the swamps to be free. And when they brought me back here, she took the branding with her initials and branded me.
Today, the events that took place all along the Mississippi during the years of slavery are still barely discussed.
It's very hard to talk about slavery. We are still, we have our racist past in Louisiana and in the South in the United States. And to talk about issues like that, it's difficult for people.
It's close to home.
The history of slavery is a tragic, dramatic, and emotional one, and clearly it's a history that people in the South still feel very, very sensitive about. I mean, Laura Plantation is the only plantation within 300 miles where they even deal with the issue of slavery in their tours. And you do get the whole story here, but I get the feeling that the story is told in such a way so as not to offend anyone.
If you need a vacation, Samantha Brown's got the home.
It's made with mud.
All these people are getting dressed up for the parade today. They're all members of a crew called Orpheus, which is one of the biggest crews in Mardi Gras. And I got myself invited on one of the 27 floats they have going out. I've got a jester costume around here somewhere. This is a really huge room. Excuse me, do you know where number 7C is?
I don't.
You don't? That's where my costume is. Who would know? Maybe, do you know where 7C is?
On that side.
On that side.
Down that way.
Okay, so Shapiro is, here it is. Shapiro. That's pretty. That's nice. Boy, you could eat a lot of fried food and wear this and no one would ever know. This is it, the Smoky Mary. We all got whistles. I got my throws. This is gonna be fun.
Lundi Gras and Mardi Gras, Fat Monday and Fat Tuesday, are the culmination of what was originally a Roman Catholic celebration to mark 47 days before Easter.
I'm gonna need some help. I've never done this before.
You just throw.
You just throw.
Take off your mask while riding the float. This is a tradition along with the throwing of beads known as throws that dates back to the 1800s. Up until Orpheus was founded in 1994, crews were segregated by race and gender. Orpheus lets anyone ride, as long as you can afford to pay a cool $675.
This is just so overwhelming. There are thousands of people here, and they're all taking this very, very seriously. And they make you feel really guilty when you don't give them beads, and when they make eye contact with you, oh, you just feel terrible. I think I'm going to go upstairs and see if it's a little less intense. It's the most fun I have ever had doing anything. Really? Then how much do you spend on the throws? For two of us, we spent about $1,200. $1,200 on throws? Do your beads ever get tangled up?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
That's when you just throw them all.
I got him! I got him! Yes! Okay, I'm getting into it now.
people actually can't get accommodation over Fat Tuesday and the last weekend, so they come before, the week before.
If Mardi Gras on a Tuesday, starting perhaps the Friday night before Fat Tuesday, that's when they start charging cover.
Yeah, all the drink prices go up in all the places down Bourbon Street. Charge covers, even the food, everything goes up. So, yeah, if you go the weekend before, you'll get the same thing, but you can do it a lot cheaper.
New Orleans is a divided city, both racially and economically, and every section of the community celebrates in their own way. Today is Mardi Gras Day, and I've come off the beaten track to the Treme neighborhood just north of the French Quarter. Here the references aren't to Greek gods, but to Native American and African cultures. Black New Orleanians have been parading as Indians for over 100 years. It's a celebration of the protection given to fugitive slaves by the Native American tribes that lived in the swamps. The Indian gangs patrol the streets looking for other gangs to challenge in song and dance. The big procession today is Zulu, which was set up in 1916 as a parody of the all-white cruise. Like every crew, Zulu has its dress rules. Instead of a mask, participants wear afro wigs and face paint in a mockery of racist stereotypes. Agree that you can't miss Mardi Gras evening in the French Quarter, so I'm back in the Malay.